started. Victor Tom is going to kick us off here. He's our current district governor for Rotary District 7910. Go ahead, Victor.
Good morning, fellow Rotarians and distinguished guests. Such a beautiful morning, Central Massachusetts, sun's out. Welcome to Rotary District 7910's second Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit. We had a great summit last year that created networks and sparked lively discussions. And this work continued in schools, communities, and in Rotary, which leads us to today with additional topics and more excitement. I want to personally thank Bill Paulson for creating this important workshop and giving us this opportunity to work together again. We in Rotary believe that exemplifying and embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion should be a part of everything that we do. What better organization than Rotary to take up this challenge? 1.4 million Rotarians of all backgrounds, cultures, experiences, and identities in more than 33,000 clubs and in over 200 countries who want to make a difference in their local communities and around the world. Rotary strives for the fair treatment, opportunity, and advancement of all Rotarians. Furthermore, Rotary is working to create experiences where all people, no matter who they are, where they are in the world, or how long they have been connected with Rotary, should feel welcomed, respected, and valued. I'll close with Rotary's guiding principle, our four-way test, and its relevance to DEI. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? This is a fact. Diversity is a fact. Is it fair to all concerned? This is a choice. And equity is our choice. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? This is an action. Inclusion is the action. Will it be beneficial for all concerned? And this is the result. Belonging is the result. Thank you. And now I'll turn it back over to Bill Paulson to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you very much, Victor. I would like to also thank, before we go on, Elliot Rittenberg, who's been my mentor and partner in crime in putting this summit together. He's going to be the district governor starting in July, and he has done an amazing job of guiding me through this. And also all of our topic leaders. We have 8 wonderful panel discussions coming up, and each one of those panels has a topic leader, and that person has spent a lot of time preparing their topic, gathering speakers, and working with us to make this happen today. So thank you so much to them. All right, Dr. Todd Bowtie Jenkins graduated with high honors from the University of South Carolina and received 2 degrees in psychology and sociology. He earned his Master's of Science from Illinois State University and a doctorate from the University of Arkansas, and he completed postgraduate work in leading diverse organizations at Harvard University. Dr. Jenkins is the founder of Bowtie Leadership and Development, a global training, consultation, and coaching firm focused on bringing diverse people together to increase individual and organizational productivity and performance. His portfolio of clients includes various nonprofits, small businesses, colleges, and universities, and also large corporations with household names such as Walmart, Verizon, Coca-Cola, Tyson Foods, Kellogg's, AT&T, and many others. As just one example of Dr. Jenkins' track record of giving back to his community, he is a proud Rotarian and Paul Harris Fellow from the Rotary Club of Fayetteville, Arkansas. He is former Rotaract advisor, Interact sponsor, RILA presenter, youth services chief, and multiple terms on the club's board of directors, and graduated from his district and zone leadership academies. Dr. Jenkins is a veteran DEI professional and a bright light and inspirational speaker. Please join me in welcoming Todd Bowtie Jenkins.
Well, hello, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's really exciting to be here. And first of all, I just want to say thank you all so much for having me. But most importantly, it's so exciting to see friends and meet new friends, as well as to see everyone gathering on this Saturday morning to just discuss these important topics. And so I won't be before you long. I'm coming to talk about a little bit of the latest, greatest. But before I get into that, since I see some new friends on the call I never met before, you may be also wondering why I'm known as Dr. Bowtie Todd. And I thank you, Bill, so much for that awesome introduction. But let me tell you about the bow tie, because of course, I love bow ties, but to me, this bow tie, this necktie is more of a philosophy. It's kind of how I govern my day-to-day and how I live my best self. And I came of this, I had this epiphany because I love to travel around the world, and people will stop and ask me about my necktie, you know, where did I get it, or do I tie it myself? And I do tie myself, and I will tell you, I have a lot of bow ties, let me tell you that much. But I saw this as an opportunity for me to engage or get to know this complete stranger and be really curious about their background and so forth. We started to have this exchange, and we have this new level of understanding from each other backgrounds. And I started to see that this bow tie phenomenon, this conversation starter, is also something that I see as a practitioner and personally in our communities, that is a challenge for individuals every day, how to come into workplaces, how to come into organizations and have difficult conversations, and how to engage with diverse perspectives and leave better than you came. And so what I did was I created the bow tie philosophy also into an acronym, and it's very simple. I'm going to share it with you, and these are going to be like the ground rules for the virtual engagement for today and throughout your breakout discussion. So let's get started with, what does the bow tie really mean? So the first letter of bow tie is the letter B. I ask for, in the engagements today, I ask for you to be mentally present. I know that we're all virtually connected in our own comfort of our homes or however it may be, but I ask that you be mentally present throughout the discussion. So if you're able to turn on your camera, please be engaged. You know, if you're not, you know, because you may be multitasking, we understand that, but we ask everyone to be mentally present in the conversation. The next letter of bow tie is the letter O. It stands for openness. Have an open mind and an open heart. So we are all beautiful, beautiful individuals from different walks of life. And I will tell you, it's going to be discussions that you may have in your breakout that you may not agree, or you may not align with someone else's perspective. That's okay. But we're just asking everyone to come into the room with an open mind and an open heart. The next letter of bow tie is the letter W, which stands for willingness to engage. Willing to share your own perspective. I believe everyone on this call has a unique perspective and story. So, you know, it's going to be time, raise hand, get involved, share your perspective and your story, because it's up to you to own your truth and own your story in this space. Or the hardest part of these conversations and even engagement is what I call also the hardest part of this necktie, which is how to make this knot in the middle. And I'm telling you, you know, I'm not saying that these conversations hopefully will not make a knot in your stomach, but I'm asking you to think about, how do you tie it together? How do you leave this D&I summit better than you came in? And guess what, my friends? It's up to you. It's up to you. Everyone has a role to play and a responsibility to take what they want to learn and maximize this experience. And if you do that today, you will successfully have a bow tie conversation. So if you agree to the ground rules in the chat, let's go ahead and practice. I would like for you to say bow tie in the chat if you agree to the rules today, you know, because I really think we can get some bow tie vibes in this fall diversity, equity, and inclusion summit. And I see them coming in, Bill. I love it. I love it. I love it. So now we can have a bow tie experience. So let's get started. So what I'm going to talk about really quickly, I want to level set, because I know we're all coming into the space from different walks of life and different experiences, and that's beautiful and that's okay. So I want to level set around, you know, these terms. What do these terms mean and the challenges? that has come with these terms. I also want to talk to you a lot about, some of the things that I'm seeing as a practitioner. I'm a global consultant, work with a lot of different organizations, and I'm going to share with some of the things we're seeing in 2022. Since a lot of individuals on this call are already in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, or they may be new, but you're all here for a reason. So that means you have passion and you want to be a part of the change that you would like to see in your communities or workplace. And then last but not least, I'm going to give you a little tidbit on how you can move this forward so you all can have this in your breakout conversations. So let's get started with the basics level set. And I'm not trying to insult anyone by level setting on what these words mean, but I think it's very important as a practitioner that we always try to ensure that everyone understand our perspectives of these terminology, because we can't make assumptions that everyone shows up to these words the same way. Trust me, it's not the truth that everyone shows up the same way with these words. So I'm going to level set with what these words to mean. What is diversity? Well, diversity to me is twofold. Diversity is visible and invisible differences that make a human complete. Okay, so visibly, you see a good looking brown guy with a bow tie on this camera. That's my visible difference. But invisible, you may not know that I'm one of 13 kids. I can hablar Espanol and falo Portuguese. I'm afraid of heights, but I love to travel on planes. So I want people to understand when you show up to that word, yes, it's the things you see on the outside, it matters. It's also the things you can't see, like your invisible disability, sexual orientation, faith, mindsets, perspective, etc. Okay, that's diversity to me. Let's go to this next word we throw out a lot lately: inclusion. Inclusion is like, that is the word. You have to say those in interviews or you may not get that job. Inclusion is really, really cool. It's really all about action. Inclusion is creating a space, and it's allowing the opportunities for us to behave in a way that we respect and value all these invisibles and visible differences. Very simple, but I want you to know inclusion is an action. It does not just happen. You have to create the environments and the spaces. But if you don't just start with respect, you also want to ensure that individuals, because this is what we say in research and practice, individuals want to be seen and heard. That's how they feel included. Okay. And how many of you say, well, Dr. Jenkins, why do you put heard in your definition? Well, my friends, how many of you all know you could be doing a lot of talking, but that does not mean anyone is listening. So we want to ensure that we're creating those spaces in our organizations and communities. Well, I'm so glad that this E has arriving in our climate. Which is the equity, right? Because we continue to have these conversations in corporate America, a lot of civic organizations or nonprofits around the differences between equity versus equality, because there is a difference. And I'm so glad that we're starting to have a lens that's focused on equitable mindsets and equitable outcomes. Well, I would tell you that some leaders are still struggling with what this means in the context of what we're trying to do. So the best way I explain it is I just really simply use my shoe. And I wear a size 10.5, brown shoe is my favorite shoe to wear. And when it comes to equality is, Donna, you get a shoe, Bill get a shoe, Anna get a shoe, Roger get a shoe. It's like Oprah, everybody gets shoes, okay? That's equality. But equity is giving everyone on this call a shoe that fits them. And that means I have to do some more intentional work to like, hey, tell me what size shoe do you wear? Hey, what color do you wear? And I guarantee you, when people have the shoes that they desire that fit them the best, they can be their best self. And I have seen in our day-to-day work that we still have people showing up to our organizations every day with shoes that are given to them that's not their size, and they're forced to wear them. And they're very uncomfortable, and they are still trying to navigate that in their day-to-day. So we got to understand that when we look at this visual, it's worth 1,000 words. And some people still ask me, they look at this and they say, oh, okay, I get it, Dr. Jenkins. Are we just propping up the short people when we're talking about equity work? And I'm like, no, executives, that's not what we're talking about. When we're talking about equity, we're talking about removing the structural barriers to opportunity. so everyone can have access to the mission of the organization or the vision or what we say that this organization will do for you. That is the access, that is the barriers that we need to continue to examine as leaders and organization members to see how do we remove that, because everyone can have opportunity to that. And so it's very important to understand, where are we in this space today, my friends? What is the reality of equity in our communities? What is the reality of equity in our workplaces? What is the reality of equity even in our own homes? And so over these last 10 years, it continued to be a very handy topic at the table, really put out a challenge in the D&I community and across the entire life cycle. And they're challenging is, how do we dismantle a system of inequities to build an inclusive ecosystem? Because we are living in a day that we are standing on a foundation, unfortunately, of inequities. And so as members of this communities, as the gathering, the convening of the summit, this is the challenge that we must continue to think about when we have these conversations in our breakout, or when we go back to our organizations, or we wake up on Monday to continue to do this work each and every day. Because we all know when we get inclusion right, it makes us all bigger, better, and stronger together. It's a case. We see the business case. We feel it. It's a case where everyone is included and everybody wins, including straight white old men. Everybody wins in inclusion. I'm telling you what I know. I do this every day. And so as practitioners, why are we still challenged today in this space? So let me tell you some of the things that I have captured with our partners at Gartner throughout this year, that we're seeing some challenges in the workplace. And I know this is a little small, so I'll make sure to highlight a couple of things just very quickly. But we are starting to see overwhelmingly, with the 36% of respondents saying the biggest challenges in D&I is holding the leaders accountable to the D&I learning objectives and outcomes. You remember 2020, right? What happened? George Floyd. Wow, everybody wanted to get a diversity and inclusion officer, a diversity and inclusion leader, a diversity and inclusion committee. Everybody wanted to put out statements. Everybody wanted to just do all this great stuff, right? And that was good for that moment. But really, did people really create the situation where they are trying to dismantle the change? We are seeing that now, went through the pandemic, people are saying, hey, leaders, you said all these things. We did these town hall meetings, you put out these statements, and we are still struggling to hold business leaders accountable. This is what the industry is saying. Of course, we are starting to see some other things around not only lack of D&I accountability, but also difficulty in recruiting diverse talent. We all know on this call right now, the job market is tight, right? And it is diverse talent out there. I would tell you, I think one of the greatest memes that I've seen is about the superstar Beyonce. She was able to find over, I think, 13 or 20 plus Black trombones players for her section. So, it's talent out there. So I would tell you, when I work with organizations, that's always the first thing that they want to work on is their representation. And they said, we can't find them. And I'm like, really? Or they just can't find you because you're not out there in the communities doing that work and being a part of that change you wish to see. So we still see that difficulty. And then last but not least, let's talk about internally. Internally, we are still seeing challenges with diversity being advanced in leadership organizations, being developed, being able to have promotions. We also send diversity continue to lead at a greater rate. So it's a lot of individuals, y'all heard about the great resignation. It's a lot of individuals being impacted by that. And so this is from the workplace. But this is also very transferable to civic organizations and volunteer organizations today and nonprofits. We're starting to see these same things happen across the entire landscape of the organizations. So I wanted to point these out, but we're also in this new climate of the organizations have done a big shift since pandemic, right? Being remote and having virtual workplaces. So we're starting to see some new ways of thinking and work that's introduced, some new challenges and opportunities for D&I, however you want to look at it. Number one, we start to see that because we're living in a virtual or hybrid workplaces, it opened up a great opportunity to get more diverse talent, right? I know one of the organizations that I worked with prior to COVID, we probably wouldn't have worked with them in London because they didn't have those virtual connections, but now we're able to work with them. So we're starting to see this, but we also see it's a challenge. We saw that when people came back to the workplace, women did not come back at a great rate, just like everyone else, right? It was still some impacts that happened. We started to see that more people are taking care of their elders. More people are caretakers, right? And they don't have the opportunity to come back into the workplace because everyone did not go back to work. Also, what happened during the pandemic, we still have people join our organizations. They never even been into the office. So you can't tell somebody to return back to work where they've never been to work. So we got to also think about that challenge too, that sometimes our culture of our organizations, or, we had to learn how to be flexible and innovative. And really, how do we lead in a virtual world? So that's been some of the challenges and opportunities for D&I. And then also, as I said, last but not least, the fundamental shift around employee expectations. I feel that it's today's climate, employees are demanding a lot than they ever done before. And they are saying, hey, if you don't have these types of D&I alignment, we won't come work for you, right? We are also seeing that employees are coming asking for different type of benefits. We're seeing the younger generation are having children later. So they're not asking for childcare benefits. They're asking for pet and animals benefits. This is things that we're seeing, right? We're also seeing that benefits around trans inclusion, right? Disability inclusion, to be welcome, and also making sure that it's seen in your benefits package. So these are some of the things that we are seeing the latest, greatest related to D&I in the workplace. And this is not just a US thing. We saw this really arise as a global conversation. Some of our global clients, they're still challenged with gender. They're still challenged with even the conversation of sexual orientation, which, the separation of that with faith. So we're starting to see a lot of that with cultures and customs, but we are seeing the younger generation push the needle and the agenda to make sure that these conversations are in the workplaces and in the communities all around the world. We're also starting to see diversity, equity, and inclusion, really shift from not just an HR phenomenon, but of course a business and an environmental. So you start to see ESG a lot, environmental social governance. A lot of the D&I teams are starting to align, partner, or either come under that office of corporate social responsibility, because investors are looking at this differently, and they're starting to look at representation and organization apart of if they want to invest in this organization. They're looking at representation of the board. And there's sometimes Wall Street is talking about, hey, we are looking for you all to at least have this percentage on your board. So we're starting to see a lot of shift. And whether you want to say the right or left or right, up or down direction, but it's moving. And I think as practitioners and human beings in the space today, this is the opportunity that we have as we convene to talk about these issues, to see how they impact our organizations like Rotary, impact our organizations like nonprofits, impact our organizations where we start to work every day or choose. But let me tell you, we still have people in our organizations are still wearing this shirt. Now, what's different, my friends, unfortunately, is that this shirt used to be proud. Oh, I'm going to wear it. But now people just put a jacket over it. But the shirt is still being worn. So I'm not going to sit up here and talk to you as fellow colleagues and peers to say, yes, we are still challenged with individuals in our organizations, in our communities, who don't care anything about what we're talking about today. And I want us to be knowledgeable of that. So you say, well, how do we navigate this, Dr. Jenkins? How do we move through this? What I have learned that yes, you should work on mindsets. You should shift mindsets, but mindsets are the hardest to change. I would tell you that in this space, but you should still encourage that. But one of the things that we do is we try to work on behaviors, because see, I can't really see how you think, but I can see how you behave. Okay. And so one of the things that we work on as organization is, how do we teach leaders how to have inclusive behaviors, right? What does that look like? Because we see in research that people can actually learn, people can be trained, they can be skilled and be competent of how to lead inclusion from an individual or from a team perspective. So I want you all to think about that, is what are the behaviors that we're trying to come out of our conversations today? And so as we think through and as we land, is that I want to remind you of a couple in the last few things, is that our roles in this space is very important. It always starts, like I always tell people, inclusion starts with the letter I. We must first understand, how do we model the behavior we wish to see, and what are we doing to be inclusive ourselves, right? That's number one. I would say number two, we have to continue to practice grace and space in what we're doing, because everyone is on different journeys, even ourselves, okay? And we have to understand that we have to lead with empathy and compassion. We have to be curious with compassion. Curiosity with compassion is a skill. Trust me, I'm learning that every day. And I think we have to practice these things as members of the summit, so we can show others how to love. We can show others that when we get this right together, we can smile and we can do better for our communities. Last but not least, I always tell individuals in this space, ensure that you have goals and metrics so we can have accountability. And we can also continue to invest and advance, and progress the agenda of D&I. And so I'm going to leave you with that thought. I know this was very quick, but understand it's okay to not have it all figured out. Before you leave the summit, it's okay. We're dealing with hundreds of years of inequity. And I would tell you, our 45 minutes today will not figure it all out. But I have learned in this space that small things can make a big difference. So as you go out into your breakouts, as you have these conversations with each other, think about, what are some of these small things that we can do, or think about some of these ideas that can make a big difference. But also think about the big ideas so you can inspire and you can really advance. But I will encourage you to think about, what are some small things we can do in this space to make a big difference? And so, my friends, today, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come in and share a little bit of the latest, greatest. But don't forget to smile and enjoy the journey, because this work is not easy. But I tell you, a smile a day can take the pain away. So don't forget to show your teeth while you have them. And of course, I'm always here if I ever can be of any support to you as an individual or as an organization. I'm going to put my contact in the chat. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or any of the socials, but we're all friends and we're all learning. And I love you all. I'm smiling with you all, rooting for you. And thank you again for having me to kick off the Fall Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit. So Bill and team, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins. Thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins, for those inspiring. Everybody's making their way back into the main room now. And hopefully everybody had a good discussion in their panels. And while you guys were discussing, Kate Sims made her way around to all the different panels and spent some time listening in. So she is going to do a wrap up for us to summarize some of the things that she heard. Kate, are you with us?
I am indeed. Thank you. So thanks. So I do want to thank Bill and Victor and Elliot for having me, and all of you. I will share with you that I had the opportunity to go in and out of these discussions, and what a powerful day. And really, I think the one thing that we all concluded in each one of the areas was that this is just the beginning. and we have a lot of work to do. So let me start with one. I am Kate Simpson, the zone representing the chair for DEI for zone 28 and 32. And we have a committee, and we are all here today because we want to see how much more work we have to do. And I think, again, we're all on the same page. So let me start with the culture competency and cultural humility team. They really talked about how this relates to DEI, deeper and better communications, better understanding of equality, belonging, psychosocial safety, and being able to show up as your full self, types of social fluency. Talked a little bit about culture humility as well. Now, remember that I was only there for moments of time, so I don't have the whole capture, but I'm going to give you moments that I did capture. From the disability team, and talked about recognizing the ability, not the disability. Important to hear that, recognizing the ability, not the disability. And really talking about how it has not gotten better since the pandemic. It's actually gotten worse for people with disabilities, for jobs and for workspace. And that, they recognize that worldwide that has been much more challenging. And then someone, shared a story with us that, he applied for a job. And this goes back to what Dr. Todd Jenkins said about visibility versus invisibility, right? He did the Zoom where they couldn't see him, but then when they saw his disability, things changed for him, which is sad, right? Sad for all of us that we're still in the midst of that environment. Went on to the DEI K-12 and really talked about the importance of teaching our children, right? And the critical race theory. And better understanding. As we talk about better understanding of DEI and the definitions, they also talked about the definition of critical race theory. And if people understood the definition of that, maybe we wouldn't fight it so much, right? And it's about teaching our children how to be critical thinkers. One of the interesting questions in that was, what is your first experience with race? And again, having those uncomfortable conversations about self-awareness, right? Knowing yourself, being able to, go into thyself and say, what am I aware of? What fears me? And how much am I willing, right, to be uncomfortable, to gain more awareness and understanding and knowledge? How teachers need to be and family need to be supportive, of our children moving forward and to help remove obstacles in their way. The LGBTQ, this one was not as many people attended this, and that affected the team. Affected the team because their view on this was that it wasn't important. And perhaps it wasn't an important part of DEI, right? And that we haven't really made a good, thorough path yet forward in the journey. It was noted that, hate has been, given permission in the last couple of years in our political field, and that there's more pressure, right, for this conversation for everyone, not just LGBTQ, but also for, people of color, that, we've gone back a few steps rather than forward. And we haven't moved. I asked the question, have we moved? And there was some anger in the group, sharing that, again, just not showing up was a statement. And that's a valid feeling for that team, right? So I want to applaud them for being open with me and transparent in having that dialogue. Talked about perceptions of non-binary and how there's still some resistance. While there's some acceptance, there's still some resistance, and again, that's that. How do we move forward there? And a big focus on, we can't talk about ourselves, right? But how do we get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? That's one of the words I like to use the most. How do we get comfortable being uncomfortable? The Indigenous group, they talked about tribes and really about when we meet, especially as the white man, when we meet with the tribes, please be careful and be respectful, not to look as though we're doing a charity, right? And that, we're asking them to the table to, again, gain understanding, gain awareness, and to be part of, in being included. But we have to be very careful how we present ourselves. And again, you know, not looking at this from a charitable perspective, but rather being included and really being open and aware. And then we talked about healthcare. I didn't get a lot about healthcare, so I think I walked in when the discussion was about VHL. So I apologize for not being there in healthcare as much. I am in healthcare myself for 42 years. And yesterday in my own area, I witnessed an uncomfortable position that I hadn't seen in probably 30 years. I had a patient who asked us not to provide a person of color to take care of his wife. So a challenging situation. I am also on the chair. I'm on our DEI National Committee for my organization, Compassus. So still dealing with issues that we yet don't think we have to, right? And so there's you know, the Patient Bill of Rights, and then there's the Employee Bill of Rights, which is also about you know, treating people with respect and not judgment. The racism. So this was really talking about do we stop talking about racism, or do we actually encourage the conversation about racism, right? So how do we continue to have that conversation? Again, I call it, you know, again, being comfortable being uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Sit down and get to know each other. Let's start talking to each other and build awareness about different cultures. If somebody looks different than you, that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, right? It means that we need to start to learn about each other and respect each other. So one of these brought to my attention, right? We need to continue to talk about and face racism. March 21st is the UN Day of to eliminate all discrimination. There's not yet been 100% of acceptance by that to everyone, but yet we still have that day. And this reminds me, you know, when this team talked a lot about, you know, getting a group of people together that are different from you. And it's one of the series I do. I do invite people that are different, and we get together just to have a chat. And one of the chats was interesting is there was a Jewish woman who was sharing her thoughts. And she shared at the end of the conversation that she was always, even though it's difficult to be a Jewish woman in America, she was always thankful she was Jewish and not Black. Because she could hide being Jewish, but you can't hide your color. I remember how that hit me, how impactful that was, that comment was to me. So I'd encourage us all to continue to get and sit with each other, and to continue to get to know each other, and to get beyond, as Dr. Jenkins said, the visibility, right? To get beyond that visibility, because we all have to get there. And then the climate change. So they really talked about the environmental area. And one of the, as I walked into the middle of it, there was a conversation about, you know, there's a Minuteman trail, and the conversation is, do they pave it or not? They pave it for equity. So the equity portion is that wheelchairs and bicycles and people with disabilities can now go down it. But then the opposing areas, do we take all the trees down from an environmental factor? You know, and so that conversation, so we can see how DEI has been seeping into every aspect of what we do each and every day. So again, I thank everybody. The conversations were so passionate, and we put a lot of vulnerability out there today as well. What I do love about the conversation today, it has really goes back to showing us that we started this many, many years ago. And I would encourage us not to allow it to be a flavor of the month. If this is not embedded in your clubs, if it is not embedded in your daily life, it is not embedded in what you do every day, speaking the truth about where we need to go, I'd encourage you to do that. I'd encourage you to, again, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like my other one is show up. When I say show up, it's about showing up and being an advocate for all. Don't sit back and listen. Don't be afraid to speak up. So show up, and show up 100%. And then I think the other really mindful one is really, I love the thing about being curiosity. Put your curiosity over judgment, right? Ask curious questions. and really, begin to start to understand, because we're starting to understand different cultures, and be with each other. It's about bringing that awareness forward, and it's about being tolerant, and it's about being accepting and respecting. And so I think we, again, I think the last thing before I get into a little bit more about the zone and what we're doing is about sustainability, right? So really, how do we bring DEI in, and how do we start the conversation, but how do we sustain it? How do we make sure there's an impact? How are we measuring that impact? We don't want it to be where we just get, again, comfortable. Oh, we talked about it, and we've done a good job, and everybody's on board. And if we look back at our clubs, I'm pretty confident in saying that not everybody's on board, and there's not a clear understanding, and we don't want it to be a checklist. In nursing, what I say is, let's not task everything, but let's really make sure that we have full understanding of what we're doing, right? There's a difference between a checklist and a task, and we don't want DEI to be a checklist and a task for each one of our clubs. Rather, we want it to be impactful so that we really can, bring understanding, awareness, and collaboration, and being inclusive of all races. So for the zone 28 and 32, we have a committee. Basically, what our committee is doing is we're putting together a 4-step process to really help all of the districts and clubs, but it's really for the club presidents, giving them resources to begin to have, if they haven't had this conversation, but not to demand that we're going to talk about DEI today, but start to gain some understanding at the bottom level. Figure out where your foundation is. Figure out where your club is. Start to have little conversations, and we've done it in a 4-week process so that we can help others get there. So we're interested, if anybody who does want to join our committee, we would love to have you. We will be sending out information shortly on the committee, and how you can be a part of it, and how we can help you all in everyone's journey to really address what we all need to do. And that's what's going on with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I thank you for allowing me to be part of this. And Bill, I'll give it back over to you.
All right, thanks, Kate. What a great event. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. And I hope you will go right away once we get our email and register for the Spring Summit coming up in March. We'll send a follow-up email with the link for that. And if you have an idea for a topic or presenter for the spring, feel free to email us and let us know. We'd love to have your thoughts on what we should be presenting and who should be presenting it. And as you're working in your community on DEI projects, please reach out to your local Rotary Club. Rotarians in the audience, you're a group of people, and I really appreciate you. And I hope you got tons of ideas today to bring to your community. An email will go out in the next week with links to the recordings of today's event, and feel free to share that with others. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for joining us today for the summit.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.